On this channel, $1 Million Made Easy, we run numbers for people. We use the actual historical returns to the S&P 500 for the last 100 years, which includes the depression years. We project ahead what similar returns might do for you in the future. None of them will be identical to what's happened in the past, but it will provide us a range from returns you might have during the depression type returns in the future, or maybe as good as the 80s and the 90s. But we're going to go ahead and run the numbers. And we got a situation here. First of all, I want to show you just what it would take to get to a $500,000, because that's what I'm finding. A lot of people are saying they can't get to a million, but I want to show you if you have the time, if you have 30 years and can just put $2,500 a month in, or $2,500 a year, it'd be a little over $200 a month, and you get 11% return. By the way, the S&P 500 has averaged over 11%, but you would have a $500,000 after 30 years, of which most of the money came from what your money earned. That's why you want to get it in there and let it work for you. Look at the difference here. 84% of the money is coming from what your money earned, and only 15% of what you put in yourself. That's why you wanted to get it. I want to show you, okay, let's see if somebody that has 500,000 doesn't have the million. Let's go ahead and I'll show you how this works. We're going to put in 500,000 as the beginning balance. You say this individual needs $4,500 a month. That's what he figures his expenses will be, which is be $54,000 a year. We're going to give him a 3% COLA. We can change any of these amounts. We're also going to change the asset allocation because you don't want to leave it all in the S&P 500, because the market's going down. You don't want to be taking it out of that because then you'd be selling low. So we can do any of these percentages. Let's do a 70-30, which means 70% staying in the S&P 500 because you want to get the gains that you can have in the good years, but you want to avoid the down years, and that's why you have the cash reserve account over here. What else do we need to do? Oh, in Social Security, this is key. This is key. Let's say you're at Social Security age and you're going to get $2,000 from Social Security. Well, that means you only need $2,500 of this $4,500 coming from your nest egg. You only need $30,000 coming out of that because you're going to get the rest of it coming from Social Security. We can change any of these numbers. We can change it. For example, if you took it in the 5th year, if you're retiring at age 63 and taking it at 67, then the $4,500 would be coming out of the nest egg until you hit that 5th year. Then the Social Security would kick in. But we're going to leave it right here, and we're going to run the numbers. This should show you how we do this on this channel. Let's go ahead and update this. This is going to look at the returns for every single year for the last 100 years. Again, projecting ahead what might happen, given what actually has happened. None of these numbers will be identical going forward, but they can give us this range. So here's what we see. 7% of the time, 7.4% of the time in the last 100 years, given all these numbers, a scenario, you would run out of money. 7.4, 92.6% of the time, you'd be just fine. Look at this graph, folks. The only time you would run into trouble if we had returns like the depression years, or if we had the years like the 2000. People often say, why use a depression? Well, look, as recently as the year 2000, you would have a problem because you had 3 down years and then down 37%. It was basically a down decade, surrounded by really good decades, 80s and the 90s and the 20 teens. The market always seems to come back. But if you actually hit that scenario where you were doing it around the year 2000, let me show you what we're talking about here. These are the actual returns going down through. I'm starting in 1998. I just want to show you how these numbers work, because after 25 years, you would be running out of money in 1998. Why? Because these years knocked you down so much. So you end up after 20 years having 143,000 left. But then by the time you go down to year 25, it wouldn't quite make it 25 years. You'd be out of money in this scenario. So, but 92% of the time, you just be fine in the 20% graph. Here's the 30% graph. And again, it doesn't have the year 2000 anymore. It just has a depression year. So basically, you're in great shape because we haven't had 30 years. That's why I can't show you the 30-year graph since the year 2000. But that's what we do in this channel. We run all kinds of different numbers. So what could you do if initially you start out and your first 3 years were down years? Well, you might have to go down to 4,000. Let's see how this might work out. Just looking at the year 2000, you're running out of money in 17 years in this scenario. We could change the asset allocation, does that help much? Right now we're running out of money in 17 years. You can see the red here. If I hit, let's do a 50-50. It actually got worse. 60-40, stayed about the 17. What's going on? Well, you're taking out 6% of this 500,000, but on this cash reserve account, you're not getting 6%. I just got to go running at 3%. We could run it any amount you want, but this is a more conservative liquid account. You're probably not going to get much more than 3 or 4%. You're probably not going to get this 6%. That's why this changing the asset allocation doesn't really help you much. Let's go down here right here. Let's go down to 70-30. It helped a little bit, made it last a little bit longer. But again, you're only getting 3% of this money, and yet you're taking out 6% and you're going up by 3% a year. Let's leave it at 70-30. What else could you do? How about if you cut back on your COLA and went to 4,000 a month? Man, remember you were planning on 4,500, but again, 92% of the time you beat is fine. But we want to look at those scenarios because we could have another year like 2,000. How would that work out with this 2% COLA and 4,000 a month? Then you'd have 158,000 left after 20 years. We haven't had 25 years since the year 2000, so we really can't run it. See how low you'd be down after 24 years. You'd be down to $92,000. Maybe a couple more years you better take it. So you're getting about 26 years out of this amount if you cut back to this. Again, this is only if you have these 3 down years initially. We do any other scenario, these numbers are just amazing after 20, 25, 30 years. Again, we saw the graph right here after 20 years. No problem. Just getting a little bit low right there. That's cutting back to 4,000 a month instead of the 4,500. We go back to the 4,500. We update this, going with a 2% COLA, staying with a 70-30. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but I just want to show you what we can do with this channel. We love to run numbers for people just to give you some idea. Is 500,000 going to be enough? I'm watching lots of YouTube channels. That's what they're doing. They're retiring on 500,000 and they're taking their Social Security, and look what they have after 20 years. 6% of the time you'd be running out of money. Here's the graph. Again, during the Depression years and recently is the year 2000. Those are the only 2 problem areas, but because it's happened so recently with this 2000, I like to run the numbers. Here's the numbers from 1997, 1996, there's 1997. Again, as you get closer to these down years, that's when you start running into issues. 1998, you're down to 194,000. 1999, now you've got the issue with running out of money after, 23 years? In the year 2000, you're actually running out of money in 17 years. Again, that's because you had 3 down years. But that's what we do on this channel. We love running numbers for people. We do all kinds of different scenarios. In this case, we actually had the second decade taking out less because usually you start slowing down in your 70s. If you retire in your 60s and 70s and in the 80s, so I can change any of these amounts too. I got this knocked down by 10% each of the 2 decades, which allowed your money to last a little bit longer because you were taking out a little bit less. But you can see the problem of the year 2000. How about 2001? Again, look at this box right here. You're still running out of money after 19 years. If we go to 2002, all of a sudden you've got 242,000 left after 20 years. Why? Because you only have 1 down year. And we have the down year down here, but you had all these good years. You want to have money in there in the S&P 500, so when the market does come back, which it inevitably does, you can benefit from that. And if we go to any other year past that, you're going to have no problem. 453,000 if we looked at the 2004 numbers, even though you had a down year coming up here. But that's what we do on this channel, run all kinds of different numbers. Again, we were just looking at the Depression type years and the other years, but every other scenario, you got all kinds of money. Look, if you retired in if you retired in returns like 1980, you'd have all of these good decades, decades that we talked about here. You'd have the 80s and 90s working for you, which basically were just super good decades. The 20 teens were good decades. After war, post-war, 1950, 1960. But that's what we do on this channel. We run numbers for people. I just wanted to give you kind of an idea of all the different numbers we can run. But it looks like a lot of people would be in just fine shape with 500,000, and if you needed 4,500, if you had this Social Security and you kicked it in right away. Say you got more for Social, or say you started the Social Security a little bit later, maybe in the 6th year. Well, that changes all your numbers. And we're no longer going to have our 6% because you're taking out more at the beginning and you're still getting hit with some of these bad years. How many times were you run on money in the last 100 years? Recalculating here, 23% of the time. So again, all this plays into when you start taking your Social Security, how much you get for Social Security, how much your expenses are. But that's what we do on this channel, run all kinds of different numbers. Again, the graph for the 20-year here. Now you got the Depression years, yes, but you also got around 73 and 74, and you got more of the years around the year 2000 that are problematic. Why 73 and 74? Because that had 2 down years in a row. Again, if these down years are initially, when you retire, they call that sequence of returns risk. If you have that when you first start out, it can really affect what you need to do. But what would you do? You could cut back to 4,000. You could change your asset allocation. You could change your cost of living increase. You would adjust to it. If you did that, this 23% would go down because you're taking out less and you're taking less of a COLA. We could also change the asset allocation, but how much does it change it? Right here, recalculating, instead of 23% of the time rounding money, only 5%. So that's what you would do. You would adjust. That's what you always do. People adjust accordingly. But again, that's what we do on this channel, run numbers for people. Please consider subscribing, please sharing and liking these videos. Let other people know that this channel exists, that we can run numbers for them, all kinds of different scenarios. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a numbers guy who wants to help people out. Thanks for watching.